Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker. All right, everyone, welcome to episode 65 of Tokyo Wave. We are your hosts, Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. Today we are joined by a returning guest, the Akiya hunter, real estate consultant, event producer, and extreme metal curator, Matt Ketchum.
On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
Political happenings,
business,
and other random garbage.
Here are this week's top news highlights.
Tokyo to be under COVID-19 state of emergency during Olympics.
Hilltop embankment to be investigated over deadly mudslide in Atami.
Evacuation order for Fuchu, Hiroshima mistakenly sent to Rakuten users in Fuchu, Tokyo.
Ooh.
This week in Japan.
All right, let's get started with our top news item this week. Tokyo to be under COVID-19 state of emergency during the Olympics.
Kyoto News has reported that Prime Minister Suga's government decided on July 8th to place Tokyo under a fresh COVID-19 state of emergency for the duration of the Olympics in an effort to curb a recent surge in infections.
The measure, to be effective from July 12th to August 22nd, will see the Summer Games held without spectators at venues in and around the capital, dealing another blow to the event that was postponed by 1 year due to the pandemic.
Suga said at a task force meeting to decide the measure, quote, "We must take stronger steps to prevent another nationwide outbreak, voicing concerns over an increase in people venturing outside and the highly contagious Delta variant of the coronavirus first detected in India."
It's not the India variant, it's the Delta variant. Get it right.
Make no mistake.
In addition to Tokyo, the state of emergency already in place in Okinawa and the quasi-state of emergency covering Chiba, Saitama, Kanagawa, and Osaka were both extended to August 22nd.
They gotta make sure all those pesky foreign Olympians don't go wandering around Japan to Kyoto to see all the beautiful sights.
I actually went past the athletes village a couple of days ago, and the security parameter around the athletes village is pretty serious.
Oh my gosh.
And I get a very strong sense of they're not trying to keep us out, they're trying to keep them in.
Man, like, I hate to say it, it's like North Korea for those Olympians.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, you know, this is going to color their idea of Japan. Because this, for many of the Olympians, may be their only time to come to Japan.
Yeah, of course. And everybody wants to see certain areas, right?
Oh, they'll just have to come back. Hopefully their experience is not ruined by this whole thing we're going through right now.
Yeah. So the quasi-state of emergency currently in place in 5 other prefectures, Hokkaido, Aichi, Kyoto, Hyogo, and Fukuoka, will expire on Sunday as scheduled. The measure carries fewer restrictions on business activity and targets high-risk areas rather than entire prefectures.
It will be Tokyo's 4th state of emergency since the start of the pandemic early last year, with the government prohibiting restaurants from serving alcohol and maintaining the request for them to close by 8 o'clock p.m.
We just got that lifted and now, psh.
Yep, we're back. Up next, Hilltop embankment to be investigated over deadly mudslide in Atami.
The Mainichi has reported that the damage from a deadly large-scale mudslide that occurred in the central Japan city of Atami in Shizuoka Prefecture on July 3rd may have been exacerbated by an embankment at the top of the mountain.
Exacerbated, or caused it.
Yeah.
Shizuoka Governor Heita Kawakatsu said at a press conference that his government intends to fully look into the matter. Quote, "Almost the entire embankment went down with the mudslide. We will thoroughly investigate just who piled up this soil and for what purpose."
Embankments are man-made structures comprised of hardened soil. According to Shizuoka Prefectural Government estimates of the around 100,000 cubic meters of material that came down in the mudslide. Soil from the embankment is thought to represent about 54,000 cubic meters of it, so more than half. It appears the embankments were constructed in 2010 or earlier.
It is expected that experts will go ahead with investigations, but Hirofumi Ota, head of the prefectural government's crisis management department, spoke reservedly on July 6th, stating, quote, "We are keeping in mind that the unambiguous cause of this was destructive, irregular weather conditions. Even if there was a development, making assumptions including that private sector projects are one of the causes could lead to individuals being targeted for defamation.
It's not my fault!"
Tar and feathers.
Regarding the embankment, workers and others have been cited disposing of excess soil in the area around it before the disaster, and nearby residents had also voiced their concern over its existence. At a July 6 press conference, Atami Mayor Sakai Saito only went as far as saying, "The establishment of a causal relationship is dependent on investigations by experts."
In response to this mudslide disaster, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism has decided to inspect embankments nationwide for safety. Jurisdiction over embankments is covered by a number of state ministries and agencies, and the Land Ministry intends to partner with its counterparts, including the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries, as well as the Ministry of the Environment, to carry out the survey.
Because of assertions that the embankment increased the damage in the latest case, the Land Ministry decided it is necessary to hold investigations as to whether similar sites exist across the country. Specific methods will be decided at a later date.
They're going to poke at it with sticks. At a July 6th press conference, Minister of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism, Kazuyoshi Akaba, said, quote, "We are aware that we must consider moving toward comprehensive checks of embankments across the country in tandem with ministries and agencies concerned."
We will discuss this in more detail in our interview with Atami area resident Matt Ketchum.
Next up, evacuation order for Fuchu, Hiroshima mistakenly sent to Rakuten users in Fuchu, Tokyo.
The Mainichi has also reported that an emergency alert issued by the city of Fuchu in Hiroshima Prefecture on July 8th over the threat of the torrential rain, ordering people to evacuate, was mistakenly also sent to the mobile phones of some people in Fuchu, Tokyo.
In response to inquiries from residents, the city in Tokyo issued a notice on its website saying, "No evacuation information has been issued."
According to the Fuchu municipal government in Tokyo, the wrong email was sent to users of Rakuten mobile services.
A spokesperson for Rakuten Mobile commented, quote, "Due to some kind of glitch, the emails were sent to the cities of Fuchu in Hiroshima Prefecture and Fuchu in Tokyo. We don't know how many people we've accidentally sent the wrong message to. It will take some time to determine the cause."
Man. You know, this is scary too because it's been raining like crazy in Tokyo, so...
Yeah, so especially in the middle of a rainstorm, if you got an emergency evacuation notice, you'd probably take note of it.
Absolutely. I'm just imagining, this past week receiving something like that.
Yeah, there's people saying, "Oh no, we have an emergency evacuation order. Maybe we should check the local website." Said nobody, never.
Yeah.
Up next, we have a special interview with Matt Ketchum, Akiya hunter, real estate consultant, event producer, and extreme metal curator.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave.
Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Matt moved to Japan in 2009 after graduating from Hobart and William Smith colleges to teach English in Miyako, a small port town in rural Iwate Prefecture, in the northeast of the main Japanese island of Honshu. Abundant seafood, open-minded musicians, a well-paying, easy job, and a low cost of living, Matt was enamored with Inaka life. But then on March 11th, 2011, at 2:46 p.m. all of that was washed away by a 37.9 meter tsunami, and he was left standing outside of a hilltop temple, homeless, watching the city burn.
After 2 months of organizing response teams in Miyako, Matt moved to Tokyo to work with art galleries and NPOs active in the Tohoku region. Fast forward through a diverse career spanning market research, consulting, and serving as executive director of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Japan, Matt is now disrupting rural real estate as co-founder of real estate consultancy Akiya and Inaka.
Apart from all that, Matt is a black metal warlock who has relentlessly pursued his passion for independent, boundary-pushing music as a guitarist for bands Dark Corpse, Wretch, and now Worship Pain. Matt is also a respected booker and tour manager.
Matt, thanks so much for coming back on Tokyo Wave.
Super stoked to be here, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Matt, we've had you on the show a few times now, and we've never gotten to ask, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
That's actually a really good question that maybe segues into something that we want to talk about, which is my experience getting vaccinated in the U.S. Yeah. So I was just in Traverse City, Michigan is where I went to, right, to get vaccinated. Long story. We can get into it. But what's important right now is ice cream. So in Traverse City, there is Moomer's homemade ice cream. No joke. Look them up. That's Moomers.
Moomers.
Right.
That's not a euphemism for something.
And they have a flavor called Cherries Moobly, which was probably the richest ice cream I've ever had. Really, it's quite good. I don't like sweet things either very much, but not this time because I went there. Not only did I discover that as a 34-year-old adult, 2 scoops of ice cream is entirely too much no matter what cone you get. If you get a waffle cone that has fudge and peanuts on it and 2 scoops of ice cream, you're going to be having one hell of a nap in about an hour.
Right on, right on.
I feel sleepy just hearing that.
I remember getting about 3/4 of the way through it and just like shaking my head and saying, this is too much. But yes, Cherries Moobly, folks. That's Cherries Moobly by Traverse City Ice Cream Company, Moomers. Go check it out.
Moo.
So, Matt, you just mentioned you went to the U.S. to get vaccinated. What was that experience like? How was it?
So, as I'm sure that everybody knows, is, with COVID-19 and the pandemic and all this stuff, like you have to get PCR tests and 72 hours. And, if you're not, especially with Japan, if you're not a resident, then you can't even come in. And so, there's all this stuff going on. And so like, just to walk you through it real quick, the first section, I guess, is prior to leave, pre-departure. Which, you have to get PCR tested, right? And so, here's one great thing. I talk a lot about rural areas, but that's not to say that cities don't have, their merits. There are a lot of merits to city centers, one of which is comparatively better healthcare, or at least more accessible. And so because I live in the Izu Peninsula in Yugawara, if you went, well, number one, actually, like this is going to be an incredibly confusing conversation. Just let me preface it with that. So number one, there's a lot of options out there for PCR testing and not all of them are vetted. It's very confusing. You can't, there's a lot of advertisement marketing to say, hey, come on over. We'll this, that, and the other thing. But do you actually know if they're going to deliver on what they promise, all this stuff, right? So the first thing that I did is, as an American citizen, I figured, I bet the embassy, their recommendation is probably the safest bet. And so you don't have to be an American citizen to go to the embassy's website or to even use their recommendations. But if you go to the U.S. Embassy's, the Japanese U.S. Embassy's website, they have a list of, their kind of recommendations in each of the 47 prefectures, right? Of where to go get PCR testing, like reliable testing. And so I did that. I live in Kanagawa. And of course, that's where Yokohama is, right? And so most of the sort of recommendations that they had were somewhere around Yokohama, which, is kind of fine, but it is, an hour or so from where I live, which is a little bit of a pain in the ass. So my first thought was, Well, okay, there's that 72-hour thing. Got to make sure that that works. So I guess on 3 days prior, and it's 1 day turnover, right? So you get on day 1, you get the test administered. Then on day 2, you get the results. And then you have 72 hours, which is 3 days. So you probably are going to be leaving at least on day 2, if not day 3. And then if it's day 4, you're totally screwed. So my initial thought was, oh, okay, on day 1, I'll go from Yugawara to Yokohama, get the test, go back to Yugawara, go to sleep, wake up on day 2, go back to Yokohama, get my results, go back to Yugawara, go to sleep. And on day 3 was when my flight was. And so it was from Haneda, which is near, Yokohama or whatever. So that's a lot of back and forth, right? Which was stupid, I thought. So I ended up just getting like a hotel room in Yokohama for 2 nights.
Right. But for those that don't live right next to the airport, you're basically saying even departing is quite a hassle.
Yeah. I'd say the 2 major factors are that 72 hours and then also the veracity of the clinic that is administering the test, as well as because it's one thing to say, don't worry about it, we'll get it to you in 12 hours. It's another thing to actually get it in 12 hours.
Right.
And so peace of mind is not at all a part of this process. You will, if you're like me anyway, you will constantly be on edge about, whether or not things are going to work out. So they did, which is good, obviously. So that's the hassle. On the day that I left from Haneda, which is a very large airport, right? Normally pretty packed. It was absolutely empty. Like spooky. 28 days later, London is entirely devoid of any humans, kind of empty.
And there's like massive aircraft parked everywhere, right?
Yeah. It's the weirdest feeling, right? Actually, I took a bunch of video and photography. There we go. Of it. And who was it? Somebody commented on one of the shots that I took, and they were like, wow, that really reminds me of like Jack from The Shining, just like sitting in the hotel by himself. Right. So that was odd. It was actually kind of cool too, because I got some, again, video and photos that not that many people, I think, have had the opportunity to take. So that's kind of nice. Anyway, got on the flight. That was also spooky. I think there were like 10 other people on a 747 with me. Which was nice because I got to say too, I flew Delta. I don't think I've ever said a positive thing about an airliner. Got to say, Delta really knocked it out of the park.
Ooh.
They were super helpful, both going from Japan to the States as well as on the way back. They mad props to Delta. I can't believe that I'm saying that, but Delta, good job.
That's good to know. I've heard stories of the airliners not allowing foreign residents to board at the terminal stations in like Los Angeles going to Tokyo.
I wouldn't be surprised to hear about that. It is very, I wouldn't even call it case by case. It's just, it's not case by case. It's chaos by chaos, as it were. Right. So that wouldn't surprise me. My experience was, I guess, maybe lucky in that sense that I didn't run into many hiccups at all, if any. But yeah, so I flew Delta, maybe 10 people on the flight. Like I literally have like pictures of they're spooky, like the most cyberpunk pictures I've ever taken. Cause like the lights are purple and neon and nobody's there. And I've got a mask on and it's just weird. Entering the US, honestly, I barely even remember it. So that was easy. Like there was no hiccups at all with that. I mean, it felt just like normal, which because it felt like normal was weird. So that worked. You've got to do, I guess, 2 weeks of, I guess it's 2 weeks of like self-selecting, not self-selecting, but like, try to quarantine as much as you can sort of quarantine. So I landed, I think it was on the 13th of May. God. Yeah, I think it was then. So I landed on the 13th. On the 14th, here's the great news, folks. You'll get to the States, go to any drugstore, just walk in and be like, give me that vaccine. They'll be like, we got you.
Wow.
For free. It'll take like 15 minutes, no hassles, no nothing, right? It is the simplest goddamn thing I've ever, well, probably not ever, but like so far as coronavirus is concerned, everything is really screwed up. This was it wasn't even streamlined. There was no stream to streamline. It just got done. Right. So that was good. I got the Pfizer vaccine. which means that between the first and the second dose, there's originally I thought it was 2 weeks. It's actually 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just hung out in Traverse City, did I think it was 7 days of quarantine coming into the States. Did a lot of biking, did a lot of kayaking, did a lot of gardening, sampled, like it's a small town, Traverse City. They have a lot of really excellent whiskey and craft whiskey and craft beer. They've got some outstanding cherries, like I was just talking about with Moomer's ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Traverse City's cherries are super good. And it's right on Lake Michigan, so it's absolutely beautiful. So yeah, it was honestly an incredibly relaxing experience, like almost like an oasis in the midst of a COVID storm, right? But then re-entry started coming up, and that's when I started freaking out because I had heard so many, crazy stories about it. And sure enough, it was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. Probably won't get to all of it, but let me lay out right now the most important thing that anybody, regardless of what country you're in, you must know, keep in mind if you go to get vaccinated outside of Japan, is that 72-hour window. It begins when the test is administered, not when you get the results. Once they stick up that swab up your nose, it's go time. The clock has started.
Wow.
Right? Regardless of whether or not you get a positive or negative result from that, once you've been tested, the clock has started.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so from then, 72 hours hence, you must be, here's this next point that's super important, you must be on the final flight that is terminating in Japan. If you're transferring or have layovers or anything like that, being on any other part of that itinerary does not count, right? You need to be on the final flight within 72 hours of getting the test administered.
So if the plane is late, if there's a delay at the terminal station, like from Los Angeles to Tokyo.
Actually, that's a really good question, and I'm a little bit incorrect. It's having boarded the final flight.
Having boarded the final flight.
So
okay.
it may be the case, and again, I'm no expert, like talk to Delta or somebody about this to confirm, but it, from a logical point of view, just like running it through my head, even if the flight is delayed, but everybody is boarded and are not disembarking.
Okay.
You're like locked in
Gotcha.
to the thing. Even
Wow.
if it's delayed, I would, from a logical point of view, that makes sense that you'd be okay. Right.
It sucks that we have to like think about it in this greater detail and like dissect it like
Well,
this.
I mean, that's also where Delta came in super helpful. They have some super like highly distilled, very direct information about exactly what you need to do. If MOFA, as much as they've tried, right, the Japanese government's website does a very poor job of succinctly describing what the hell is going on, and kind of understandably, right? Like this is a very difficult time that we live in. I'm not saying, geez, you had one job and you failed to do. No, I kind of get it, right?
Yeah.
But that was a huge pain in the ass. And honestly, from the PCR testing point of view, that's where all of my troubles came from. Oh, additionally, so there's that 72-hour window, but then there's the form, and I'm sure you've heard about. There's the official Japanese form. That's the one that's admissible. Doesn't matter what the clinic or the doctor gives you from their clinic. If the form itself from the Japanese government is not filled out, you're no go, right? And so that form has all kinds of confusing elements on it. The one that comes to mind, and thank God that I was checking to see, you have no idea how paranoid I was about this, like absolutely neurotic. Because how much would it suck if you fly halfway around the world and then they say, oh, sorry.
You got to fly back. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the one that comes to mind is...
You missed a spot.
Precisely. Right. And so the one that comes to mind is that on the form, on one of the sections, and I brought the forms with me today.
Yeah. You've got like a mountain of
Yeah, this is
documentation with
all
you.
the shit that you have to have. Like there's all of my PCR
Oh my
tests.
gosh. Yikes.
It's somewhere in here. I'll look it up. But let's see. Yeah. So on the official Japanese government form for the PCR test result thing, it, like from top to bottom on the page, there's a section that has two things that need to be checked. Number one is, not in this order, but one of the things is the test was administered on so-and-so a date, and then the test came back negative on so-and-so a date, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they are numbered on the form, And number one is test came back with a negative on so-and-so a date. Number two is test was administered, which is chronologically backwards.
Oh my God.
And so if you don't pay attention to that, if the doctor or, whomever is filling it out doesn't pay attention to that and they fill it out incorrectly, suddenly you've got something that anybody in their right mind probably wouldn't complain about. But we all know that Japan can be very, 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 very bureaucratic. And that's just one more headache to worry about. And so I ended up getting, I got 2 PCR tests. That's a longer story. But I ended up getting probably about 5. I remember bringing 14 separate blank copies of the official Japanese government form. 14.
Not 15, not 13.
14.
And I ended up getting 5 redos because there's just these little things that don't look right, or they're backwards, or this, that, like another thing was on one of them. So you can get a stamp. Some clinics have a stamp. Apparently you don't need it, but it's on the form. So try to fill it out just to not worry about it. And on one of them, they got 3/5 of the stamp onto the form, but not the whole thing. And that included the address. Right. Which is a verifying kind of thing. So I was like, oh, nope, guys, seriously, pay attention to this shit.
This is the clinic too, right?
Yeah. And they were just blown away by are you kidding me? It's also what does it matter? The entire thing is filled out by hand. So you could just I'm not saying do this, but you totally could fill out the whole goddamn thing yourself if you wanted. Right. Maybe.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so it was an outrageously complicated process.
You have to fill it out really poorly so they think a real doctor did it.
Yeah.
But then also the 72-hour thing comes into play, right? And because I was in Traverse City, which is pretty rural, response times, turnaround, all of that, what they promised one day, but actually, not the case. Which
Welcome
meant that,
to America.
right? Which meant that I had my flight booked. I paid for the test. I got the test. It got delayed, which meant that I was now out of the 72 hours. So I had to reschedule my flight. And because at this point I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's go make this as easy as possible. I ended up driving 800 miles in a day to go to Detroit City, which is where I was going to be transferring from anyway.
Oh, wow.
To get a proper 2-hour turnaround time PCR test, grab that, go back to Traverse City, get on the plane, fly to Detroit again, and then fly over to Haneda.
Oh, no.
That worked. And once I was on the plane, right, again, it was pretty smooth sailing. But the process of getting there was just a nightmare of uncertainty and changing this, that. And during that time, because I was in Michigan, it was Michigan, Tennessee, Florida, and Minnesota, I think, were 4 states that had been identified as having variant
strains.
There we go. Yeah, variant strains. And because of that, you had to go, once you landed and got through, even if everything was spick and span, you'd have to do 3 days of isolated quarantine in a hotel, right? And so I knew that and I was okay with that. But as I was in Michigan, they also released a separate list of an additional, I think it was 15 other states that needed, I thought, the same thing, but actually it wasn't the same thing. And so that was immensely confusing. Let's pause there anyway, if you guys got, because I got more to talk about. But.
No, this is just making me, I was planning on going back to the States this fall, but if it's still the same kind of system setup, I don't know, you're making me rethink my plans.
Well, if I were a professional guesser, I'd guess you're probably going to get screwed.
And I mean, I would say things are going to be immensely orders of magnitude, or at least I would assume they would be orders of magnitude easier if you just if you stay either with your family and they happen to be near a clinic and near an international airport, or you stay at a hotel, if you have all of those things in a close proximity, it's probably not going to be very difficult at all. Right?
Yeah.
But given my specific circumstances and how far out I was and all of this stuff, it ended up being a massive hassle.
So if you want to go back to the United States, ask your relatives to move next to an international airport with a direct flight to Japan.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat as you, Matt. I'm Orlando. So it would be a nightmare. My friends that are New York and Los Angeles, it's been a breeze for them, right?
Right.
Because they have the terminal.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised by that. But yeah, so as much as I hate to say it, like because I mean, again, too, if you're getting the Pfizer vaccine, that means you're at least going to be in the States for 3 weeks.
Right.
And like a 3-week hotel bill in a big city near an international airport is probably not that cheap.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's planning involved and everything. Like you could totally do it. My circumstances kind of dictated the difficulty of the experience. So don't do what I did, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, so you made it on the flight back, obviously, because you're here.
Yeah.
And you got into Haneda again, I would imagine.
Yep.
What happened next?
So let's see. There was a little bit of confusion in that as we were landing, they were saying, okay, I don't think it was the GA but like, some government agency was going to come on board and check one by one all of your papers. And once they give you, the individual, the okay to get off, then you can disembark. That actually ended up not happening. So we basically just disembarked like you always do. But from then for the next, I think I landed at like 1:30 p.m. and I got to the hotel at like 7. So it was like 6 hours of processing, most of which was waiting for another PCR test. So that was my third in, at this point, like 72 hours. So you get off, they kind of check your papers. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's not like hardcore or honestly even scared. Like everybody's very nice and, just like, oh, do you have the thing? Yep, sure do. And then they give you, here it is. So you get your official pink slip documentation that you flash to everybody saying, hey, I'm cool. And they go, okay, come on through.
You should frame that.
Yeah, right. So you do that. It's funny when you get the PCR test in Japan, or at least when you're coming back in, it's not the swab test, it's a spit one, right? So I thought it was funny because it really just looked like they had set up a bunch of like portable urinals, but instead of like a bunch of dudes pissing, it was just a bunch of people standing by themselves, like very lone, like markedly lonely, just like standing there sadly spitting into like this vial. And they need a lot.
Aaron, have you had to do this?
No, I haven't.
I actually did have to get a PCR test earlier this year, and it was, it was weird. It's just like, please spit into this cup. But I didn't hear the instructions. I understand Japanese, but I wasn't really paying attention because I'm in this it's like a plastic cubicle, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so they gave me the cup. And I'm like, you gave me a little cup. Well, usually when I get a little cup in a medical facility, am I supposed to, what am I supposed to do with this? So I asked again and said, spit into it. I'm like, all right, great. Thank God. But you have to spit up to the line.
Oh, wow.
It's
And
kind
the
of
line,
high.
yeah, the line is pretty high. And so you're not going to get it in one go.
Not at all.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
I would have said it was like I wasn't timing it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I spent like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I definitely it took 5 minutes to get it up to the line. Sorry, listeners, this is pretty gross.
Yeah. So there's just a bunch of people
Science.
just spitting. And so that happens. Then you get through that, and there's some various documents and everything, but really you just need to wait for that test to come back. And they put you in, it's not uncomfortable, but it's sort of like if you've ever been to like a Japanese meeting, then you probably understand how what type of chairs are being used, how they're arranged, things like, and you just kind of sit there.
Oh, is this an Okumura?
Right. From there, and the entire time too, there is no chance at all. Like you are in the group the whole time. It's not like there's no, nobody's yelling and, it's not like American Cops or something like that, but like you are very much in the system for the entire time. Like legit until you get locked into your hotel room, like you are being guided every step of the way.
Wow.
And so we did that, took all told like 6 hours. I was getting and there was no food or anything. So I'm like getting hangry. But finally we finished with that. They put us on a bus. They were seating people 1 to every 2 seats. I do distinctly remember that the windows were not open on the bus that was going to our hotel in Yokohama. which is like a 20-ish minute drive or so. They probably should have done that, but whatever. I won't complain about it now. Get there, get another PCR test, which comes back later. And then again, like more processing. I've got the papers here somewhere as well. Information about this facility. Then there's the apps. Jesus.
Oh, the
There's
notorious three apps that you have to download?
3? You mean like 7?
No way.
There's a bunch.
Stop.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, basically then they put you in your room and it's a tiny little business hotel. It's like 15 square meters for one person. I guess you can just barely avoid going stir crazy, but for like, that's the other thing. I don't know what happens to families. There was a family of 4 on the bus that I went to the hotel with, and I'm guessing that they put them in a larger room. I know that they were split up to 2 groups of 2. But I mean,
It's like the art.
exactly. But that's I won't dig into that one. So that happened. The food was kind of okay. I did confirm that they have halal, vegan, vegetarian. You have to request it, but those are options. Which I am none of these things, but I used to be vegan, so I'm still kind of on the up and up of how much a pain in the ass that can be. I was actually surprised to see that they had those options, so that's kind of good on them. Food wasn't bad. I mean, you are literally stuck. I mean, the bed takes up, half of the room, so you've got like 6 square meters to move around in.
Wow. And this is the 3-day lockdown, right?
Right, 72 hours.
72 hours, yeah.
It was nice because I was on like the 22nd floor overlooking Yokohama Bay and the Ferris wheel. Of course, the window didn't open, which is funny because I sort of just like stream of consciously said, I guess that's to prevent jumpers, and somebody responded like, "Oh, that's funny." But yeah, the window didn't open.
Ooh, wait, sorry. I missed something. Haneda to Yokohama,
Yes.
and then do you have to go back to Haneda after?
Yep. Yeah. So that's the other thing is I asked too, like, can I just, because I had somebody coming to pick me up, because you can't take public transportation, right? So somebody was coming to pick me up, but I was like, can't they just, in fact, Yokohama is closer than Haneda to where I'm going. So it'd actually just be more convenient. And they're like, no, you have to go back to Terminal 3 where you arrived at Haneda and get picked up from there. There's nowhere else that you can be picked up from.
Wow. And did we talk about this on the podcast before? During that whole time, you're technically not in Japan, right? You're in like this, what do you call it?
Yeah, that was actually a question that I had. So did you go through immigration before or after your quarantine?
Before. Like, I think it was after the PCR test was administered. But I think it was after it was after the PCR test was administered, but before the test results came back.
And then after the 3-day, you still have to go back to the terminal at Haneda.
Right. And then somebody has to pick you up, or, I'm not sure how private transportation works. Like, public cabs are no good, but it sort of sounds like you can get...
You can hire a special kind of, it's not a taxi, but like a hired car.
Yeah.
It's pretty expensive.
That's what I figured, right? Oh, and too, it turns out that a lot of people are actually just spending the full 14 days in a hotel, right? And they've been complaining because it's like $3,500 for their bill, right? Because they live in Saitama or whatever, and they don't have anybody to come pick them up. And so they just foot the entire 2 weeks in the hotel room, which to me sounds like a business opportunity.
But you said for your sort of non-voluntary quarantine, you didn't have to pay for that.
That is correct. The Japanese government paid for for me, it was 72 hours. For a few other countries at that time, I think there was also like a 6-day version. I think there's a 10-day version now. So long as it's mandated by the government, like you have to do it, then so far as I know, and so far as my experience is concerned, it is covered for. That being said, I was not aware of this as I was traveling. As I was in transit, it was another thing that I was worried about of like, oh shit, that's a 3-day stay. Does that mean I've got to pay like, what would that be, $200 or whatever? So, okay, I can afford that. But at the same time, it's like, well, geez, guys, like, come on.
Way to pour some salt on the wound.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got to say, like, there's a whole lot of fail points. We haven't even talked about the apps. That's a circus. But given the circumstances, given the fail points, given the kind of less than optimal and what could have been a lot more optimal but is not, it could have been a lot worse. I'll say that. Right. Like I said, the accommodations, while small, were acceptable. The food was acceptable. They have options. They watch you. It's like the process itself is really stupid, but they administered the stupid process very well.
Interesting way to put it. Yeah, I whenever I do an international flight from Florida to Japan, I don't sleep on the plane. So I have about a 2 to 3 hour tolerance after I land in Japan, to where for those 2 to 3 hours, I can do things. And then after that, I'm just very angry if I'm not in bed asleep. So I couldn't imagine having to go through all this like 6+ hours ordeal until you can finally get to a bed where you can lay down.
Well, yeah. But to remember that the process up until that point was so immensely uncertain and stressful and just crazy.
Your adrenaline's probably like
that. It was like, okay, yeah, this sucks. I really want to be in bed. I'm super hungry, all that shit. But like I made it. I had already passed the goal line.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, all right, this could definitely be better, but like, I don't have to worry about that big thing anymore. So, right. I'll deal with it.
The feeling of victory is there.
Yeah.
That must feel good. That must be good.
So let's switch gears. You're also really into events, and you're an event planner, manager, and you've done all kinds of, music shows and other sorts of events. What is the event scene like right now, and how soon do you think it will be until we're back to a stage where people are frequently going out again to events?
That's a good and a tough question. Like, they're happening in city centers as well as outside of city centers. Let me start by saying a positive development that I've seen is that there are more things going on in less condensed areas. Right. Saitama specifically, not anything that I know of in Kanagawa, Chiba a little bit. Saitama seems to be, so I guess there's movement north, let's say. And there's a few spots in Gunma as well that I've heard about, but haven't actually, I just hear rumors, right? So that's a good thing. I think that needs to happen no matter what. That being said, by and large, it's kind of, there are fewer shows, but the shows that are happening, fewer events, but the events that are happening tend to be in the same style as pre-corona, which is to say dangerous, right? I don't have average numbers, but I would say in general, you're probably looking at, maybe a maximum of half cap or like half pre-pandemic expectations for capacity. Everybody, so far as I can tell, is operating in the red still. That being said, I haven't seen anybody fold. I have not heard. There was one story I heard right around the time that Corona started about a club in Akihabara called Goodman, which is sort of the spiritual Tokyo home of an excellent band from Osaka called Acid Mother's Temple. And I heard that Club Goodman was closing. I think it was from Acid Mother's Temple, like on their account or something was posted there. And then like a week later, I saw a flyer for a show at Club Goodman. So I don't really know what's up with that. But aside from that, I can't think of any club that I've heard of that's been shuttered due to this. So, it seems like maybe they're taking out loans. Maybe there's some kind of forgiveness. Maybe they just were really good at saving money for a rainy day. Who knows what's up with that? But the industry is not good. I will say that there is interest. I'm slowly working on a few events out, like seriously out of the city. One in Nikko, one hopefully down in Shuzenji, another maybe up near Fujino, maybe one down where I am in Yokowara. We'll see about that. But those are going to be tiny, and I think they necessarily have to be. Of course, I don't need to say necessarily. They have to be. It's confusing. And honestly, it's a bit disheartening at this point because we've been dealing with this bullshit. Well, not even bullshit, like it's a serious threat that we're dealing with. But we've been dealing with it long enough, and new, novel, effective solutions haven't yet kind of caught on. I think that they're there, but there's also a stubbornness within the entertainment industry to just kind of stick to your guns and ride it out. Everything that I've seen thus far says that that's a bad idea, and my gut has told me for years, if not decades, that being that averse to change is a really bad idea. You should probably be open to it.
Yeah, I could go down a rabbit hole with that one, but I won't.
It's frustrating, you know. It's because I mean this stuff, and too, I mean, Jesus Christ, like events, music, whatever, like that's one of the core spices of life.
For sure.
You know, and without it, it sucks. Like there's no really other way to say it except with more expletives involved. It sucks.
Well, we were just talking about the situation with the landslide in Atami, and of course you live close by to it.
Yeah.
And we were, talking about it as it was, happening and after it happened.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Sort of surreal. And actually I feel kind of stupid because I remember the first time it occurred to me, like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Like this might be dangerous. It must have been like 2 a.m. or something. And I mean, man, it was dumping on that area for like days on end. Like visibility was like just non-existent. And at like 2 a.m., probably on the Thursday prior, there was an alarm. I was kind of just like it woke me up. And, but then I went back to bed, but then I was like, hey, wait a minute. What was that alarm about? It's been raining a lot. I live on a hill. I should read that thing. And sure enough, it was a warning of like, mudslides, landslides, all this stuff are a danger. This is prior to the big one in Atami happening. And that's when I kind of started getting a little bit nervous and keeping an eye out and mulling my options. So that persisted. And then it was a Saturday, wasn't it? Then just that video, a friend of mine who actually lives in Atami, posted, and I was like, whoa, that's actually, for me, what I immediately thought was, wait a minute, that's like a backward tsunami. Why is it coming from the mountain? It should be coming from the ocean. That's weird. And that's when I remember for maybe like 30 minutes or so, I was like, okay, should I get my go bag? Should I get out of here? Because I actually lived by car probably around 15 minutes from where that landslide happened.
Wow.
Right.
Was it like pouring down rain at this time too, where you were at?
No, it was still raining, but it wasn't dumping on us. At that point, had it already, I mean, it had definitely let up. I think it got a little bit more intense again after that.
I think that's the thing about these natural disasters, and especially landslides. It's not necessarily going to happen in the heavy rain. It's going to happen because of the heavy rain.
But when is a matter of question. And two, I mean, I remember prior to me leaving in that 30 minutes or so, I was asking a few people around town, and it reminded me, like, their response was like, I've met that response too, like 10 years ago for the tsunami, which basically they said, hey man, all we can do is pray. It's like, well, that's a stupid. I'm getting the fuck out of here. Like, I got a chance to run because some shit might go down. I'm gone. See ya.
Peace.
Yeah. So I ended up, but it was funny because for whatever reason, was like, oh, Hiratsuka, that's where I should go. Of course, that was also one of the most hard hit areas. So I didn't really escape anything. But everything was shut down. Like the buses were shut down. The trains were shut down. I managed to finagle a cab driver to drive me up to Odawara, which was, I guess, the terminal of, at that point, from there, nothing else was running, but from Tokyo to Odawara, the trains were still running.
Mm-hmm.
So I managed to get a cab from Yugawara to Odawara, and then from Odawara, I got onto the Tokaido and went to Hiratsuka and stayed the night.
Well, good to hear that you're okay. And just pretty crazy. I mean, So how long were you back in Japan and then that happened? Was that like just
2 weeks?
just 2 weeks? Jeez.
And of
Yeah.
course, too, my folks get in touch. Well, actually, it was love them as much as I do. And understandably, so I sent them a message even before right as I was leaving, like, hey, serious landslides are happening here. Don't worry. I'm playing it safe. I'm in a cab, going to a spot, staying a night, whatever. It's going to be cool. So I know you'll probably be worried.
I did the exact same thing. I called my parents actually in the middle of the earthquake on 3/11. And it was like, 4:00 in the morning for them. I'm like, hey guys, big earthquake. It's shaking pretty hard. I'm not dead. Bye.
Yeah. And so I did that same thing this time around, but for whatever reason, I guess my folks checked like the news before they checked messages from me. And so the following day, I just start getting this, no pun intended, like flood of messages from my parents being like, oh my God, well, like, where are you? What's going on? And of course, like, thank you. I'm so happy to have loving parents that are concerned about me, right? That's a great thing. But like, guys, check your mail or not even mail. Like it was right.
You should have sent him a fax.
Yeah, or something like that. or like what do you call it when like somebody knocks on the door and you open it up and it's this doofus who's like singing a message?
Yeah, singing telegram.
Yeah, there we go. So
Your
yeah,
son is not dead. He's not dead. It's an a cappella group.
yeah, right. So that was like I was happy that that they got the message, but yeah, understandably they were probably stressed out.
So you've had quite an eventful past couple of months. And on top of all this, you're involved in many projects, one of them being Akiya and Inaka. So
Oh yeah.
maybe you could give us a bit of an update on how that project is going?
Super awesome. Business is really starting to pick up. And types of business too, right? Originally, it was mostly individual investors, I guess you can say that, but individuals who wanted to buy mostly like second homes, vacation homes, things like that. That quickly evolved into still having the vacation home like aspect of things, but then also people actually legit wanting to move, right? Now we're expanding into, there's more international business coming in, but also multiple property buyers, as well as budgets are increasing considerably too, as well as just general space. So that's good. We also are in talks with some entertainment industry professionals, which is super exciting. Like really exciting for that.
Universal Studios, Inaka.
Precisely. Yeah. That's all good stuff. The type of property too. And I mean, we're discovering like this is a discovery process for ourselves. Like we know how to do it, but that doesn't mean that we've done it literally everywhere across Japan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like most recently, something that's really exciting for us is for a while, Chiba comes up a lot. And historically though, it's a lot like Shimoda down in the Izu Peninsula in Shizuoka, right? Like everybody loves Shimoda. Nobody wants to go there. A lot of the time, Chiba's the same way. It's like, oh, they hear about the wonderful stories, but it's like, oh, wow, there's no train lines and it takes 5 hours to drive there. And there's no 7-Elevens. I don't want to do that. Plus, we've had, again, historically, Chiba can be kind of difficult from a business point of view to deal with. Like there are certain areas of Chiba that just are very kind of closed, if not closed-minded, then closed-pocketed or something like that. So as much as, I want to work with everyone, like Chiba has been difficult up until now. But one of our clients requested both Chiba and Kanagawa. Basically, they wanted beaches, right? And so we're like, okay. And two, they had stayed at a place in Chiba near Mobara City that is absolutely gorgeous. And it's a renovated kominka and like really luxurious kind of stuff. And they had stayed there and were like, holy shit, you can do it. This seems awesome. I want to do the same thing. right? And so they came to us kind of timidly, honestly, like, hey, stay at this cool spot. I say, like, nice website. I appreciate what you're doing. Do you think this is like, can I do this? We're like, well, yeah, probably. And she was like, and they were like, well, what do you mean probably? And we were like, well, you don't know. you gotta hire us to do the research, right? And so they did. And we started digging. And we found it. We found the vein in Chiba, right? It's right near this place called Togane, which itself is a little bit north of the Oami station, which itself is about 70 minutes from Tokyo Station, right? And right around there, granted, it's pricey, right? This, I would say, is not the place for anybody with kind of a limited budget to check out. But if you're interested in totally kick-ass, like, jaw-dropping, eye-opening, like, you bought a what? A Japanese castle? How did you do that? This is the place to be. There seem to be all kinds of kominka, and I'm talking, like, one of them that we're working with right now is a 10 LDK.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot of LDKs.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, I think between 400 and 500 square meters for the building itself, on top of like 7,000 meters for the plot of land. So if you're looking for like palaces and, you know, party houses to host a lot of guests and, you know, this type of thing, the top of the Boso Peninsula in Chiba seems to be pretty damn promising. So I'm super excited about that right now.
It's right at the back of the neck of Chiba-chan, right?
Right.
Yeah, if you're looking at a map.
Did you call it Chiba-chan and not Chiba-ken?
Is it Chiba-ken? Really?
Do you call all prefectures Chan?
Oh, I said it incorrectly.
Oh, it's Iwate-chan. So yeah, but I mean, the great thing about that, and the reason that we found it, and this is a big part of kind of the, at least first step of the work and research that we do is, you know, you got to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And one of those major pieces is accessibility, right? There's a reason that Onjuku and Minami Boso, like, yeah, are they nice? Sure. Are they easy to get to? Absolutely not. Right? You've got to be really committed to go to those places. Whereas this area is full of super awesome spots, right? And is right. I mean, it's one shot from Tokyo Station, 70 minutes, and you're there, right? And on top of that, too, you can take a cab to Kujikuri Beach.
Yeah, it's really, really close to the beach there. Yeah, this is a kind of an unknown area, I think, because most of the time
and that's the thing about it, too, is yes, is an unknown area, but it's very close to some very well-known areas. It's just not the well-known area.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's this blind spot, right? And this, I mean, we run into this a lot of the already famous areas are famous because they're famous. And if you're not in a famous area, then you're not in a famous area sort of thing, right? It's very, what do you call that? Tautological, like something that persists in perpetuity. Like if it's famous, then it will always be famous. If it's not famous, then it won't be famous. Even if it's right next door, it's not famous. It's like, well, why don't you just live next door and like reap all the rewards and not pay for it?
That's actually kind of funny. You know, I think a lot of people always dunk on Narita because, you know, it's an airport that's sort of out there. And, you know, when you're on the train from Narita Airport into Tokyo, it's, you know, the first part of it is mainly rice fields. So I think a lot of people come away with that experience thinking, well, you know, Narita is really a shithole, isn't it? But you actually go to Narita Station, not the airport, but, you know, Narita is also a city and it's city center and it's pretty happening. There are restaurants, bars, some pretty cool, there's even nightlife and a bunch of drunk pilots.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of those.
And
those pilots, they love to drink. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but...
Yeah, so the Akiya business is definitely, but we're getting a lot of attention on both domestic and international media. Rethink Tokyo just published a piece, an interview with us. We've got a few others that we're working on right now. On top of that, too, recently, kind of to my distaste, there's an article that's been circulating about $500. Japan has $500 houses. Come and get them, but it's not going to be good enough. These articles are kind of, par for the course. They're clickbait, basically. They're good in the sense that they keep the conversation kind of top of mind for kind of the as many people as possible. The problem with them, though, is we always have to, when people contact us about it, they're like, shit, get me a $500 house too. I'm like, no. So these articles are good because they keep the conversation top of mind, but they're bad because they're not wrong. There are $500 houses in Wakayama too. Unless you're a very, very, very adventurous person who almost prefers inconvenience and buying things that are garbage, don't do it, right? Spend, even if you're spending $80,000 on a property, that's still an $80,000 gigantic house with a lot of, what are you complaining about, right? Versus go build a 200 square meter house in LA. Tell me how much that costs. Right.
And wasn't the $500 house in that article, it had like a collapsed roof or something?
Yeah. I mean, it's beyond it's a derelict building. And can you fix those up? Absolutely. Will it cost more money? Yeah. Will it ever be super great and super pretty and all this stuff? Probably not. If you want to do that, you can do that. We can help you with that if you like. Certainly don't recommend it because there's so many better options out there that are still a steal, even though they're more than $500.
Well, it's funny when you think about it. There's all this press about these $500 houses in Japan, but I'm sure there's plenty of $500 teardowns in Texas.
Exactly.
Nobody writes articles about those.
Recently, there's these $1 properties in Italy, but they're pigeon infested with no roofs. And so it's, why the hell would you even want to own something like that?
$1 house, pigeon haters need not apply.
we got a lot of pigeons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that actually has started coloring the conversation around Akiya in Japan. That does get brought up a good bit. I'm actually I'm aware of it. I haven't bothered really researching exactly what's going on in the Italian market. But what I know is going on here is, how should I start? Number one, people are interested in it. Number two, it's actually a thing. Number three, you can do it, but it's more expensive than $500. And number four, the interest and people, not just the interest, the people actually paying for them, buying them, and going and doing stuff with them through us is increasing almost exponentially with the months, as the months go by, right? So it's a thing. We've got proof of it actually working. And people are kind of, knocking down our doors at the moment with, inquiries and the money is coming in, money is hitting the bank. It's not just people asking a question and then we answer it and they're like, okay, not going to do it. The business part of it is working.
So Matt, the last time you were on, Clubhouse was the talk of the town.
Yeah, it was.
And personally, I've kind of switched over to Discord for networking and finding new people to work with for various, skill sets during the pandemic. What are your thoughts now about Clubhouse?
I don't care about it, to be honest. I'll do it. I have no negative, I guess, feelings, but I think it's jumped the shark. I think the term is because it's not like it's a bad idea. It's just that there are a lot of, you mentioned Discord is one that just do it a lot better.
Yeah.
It's funny, for a couple of weeks there, I really thought, wow, this is the future.
Yeah, a couple weeks. It was weeks.
Yeah. And then I was like, you know what? I don't have time to do this. And you can't listen to it later and forget about it.
But I mean, with Discord, for example, Spotify also has a decent offering called, what is it, Green Room, I think. But with Discord's great because you have both the chat, text chat, as well as the voice chat options going on. So do you want to host a room or whatever you want to call it? Sure, you can do that. Do you want to just, lob a question at everybody and see what comes back? You can also do that. Right. And so Clubhouse basically locks you into a specific mode of communication. And while it's having one mode of communication is definitely better than having zero, it's still it's pretty rigid in that sense.
Yeah. And with Discord, you can use it with a computer.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Isn't that a thing?
I forgot that Clubhouse isn't on computers yet. And I heard that they only recently rolled out their Android version. Apparently that's even more full of bugs than the native iOS version.
So it's probably somewhere between a Roach Motel and what's another thing that's got a lot of bugs in it?
Clubhouse is like a shitty Akiya. Is actually what it's like. Is it more than nothing at all?
And
Yes.
it's free.
Exactly. That you can pay what you get for.
Somebody call Insider. We have an article pitch for them.
I would say the example you gave, lobbing a question at like a group of specialists or whatever, or people that can actually help you solve it. I think Clubhouse does still have some utility for that. I use Clubhouse and Discord in tandem just to see, just to raise the probability of me getting a response quicker, right? But yeah, obviously, Clubhouse has that limitation. You can't type out anything.
Well, and also another thing, and I'm just thinking about this now. Another problem that I guess I have with Clubhouse is it's what do you call that? A flash
in the pan.
No, I was gonna say flash
Flash
dance,
bang.
but that's no, like when
Flash mob.
Flash mob. There we go.
It's the same.
It doesn't have sustained conversation, and so you can have an hour-long session that's really super good, and everybody learns a whole lot, but then it collapses and it ends.
Yeah, it's the same issue that Snapchat had. With just it being instantaneous. Boom, it's done. You'll never see it again.
Right.
Unless somebody records a conversation. But with Clubhouse, you're not allowed to record the
and
conversation.
that's the funny thing. The amount of jerry-rigging that's going on with Clubhouse too is a little bit like, it's not concerning, but it's just like, well, shit. If you just used a different platform, you wouldn't have to be doing all this like backwards, like rewiring of how things it just seems unnecessary to me.
Yeah.
Like if you want to play music on Clubhouse, it's pretty much impossible unless you
Have a boombox.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that. Like we still use it. I'm not like against Clubhouse. I just think that there are better options out there. And I mean, yeah, I still have I don't really have major problems with Discord kind of across the board. They seem like I've used them for a while. I'm pretty happy with their product. By the way, we do have an Akiya and Inaka Discord channel. Just look us up. You should join. Totally lost my train of thought, but
like and subscribe.
No. I totally I see where you're coming from, and I have to agree. Discord has been around much longer, right? And kind of provides a better solution for what Clubhouse is trying to offer.
Well, and too, I was just kind of lamenting how there's a whole bunch of jury rigging going on with Clubhouse in order to use it in different ways. That is kind of what happened with Discord too, though, right?
Yeah.
It was originally made specifically as a voice chat for gaming.
Right.
But then for whatever reason, it got, I guess hijacked is probably the wrong, but it started being repurposed for other uses. So maybe I'm just full of shit.
Just to go back to the Clubhouse thing, for those few weeks that Clubhouse was really popular in Japan, I thought it might actually change the way that we communicate in policy discussions as well, because Japanese politicians were starting to use the platform and they were having policy dialogues with, random people. And it was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was something that I thought really could sort of change the game.
Did the politicians stop having those dialogues, or did people stop listening? Or maybe both?
I think you just answered the question.
Both.
Well, Parker, I think one thing that Clubhouse was doing effectively is it was like a Discord for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like getting Japanese politicians to log on somewhere and talk like frankly, openly to randos on the internet, it's pretty hard to do that with anything else. But Clubhouse opened the floodgates for that. I do hope the best for Clubhouse. I hope they figure out a way to make their program, more expandable.
I know what they could do. They could kidnap Elon Musk.
Yeah.
That would work really well.
Those 2 weeks that you guys keep mentioning.
And then put him on Clubhouse from a secret location.
Guys, the 2 weeks or 3 weeks you're mentioning are the 2 or 3 weeks right after Elon Musk was on Clubhouse and he roasted the Robinhood CEO. That's what boomed or made Clubhouse boom. Really.
I forgot about that, but yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah,
Is Lord Elon still on Clubhouse, or has he moved on to better things?
it was only that one time. As far as most people know, as far as
As far as most people know, there are rumors though that there was another time.
yeah,
It wasn't recorded, so we may never know.
yeah, exactly.
Next on Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah, I mean it's an okay platform, but there are better ones out there. And right now I just really like Discord. So
I like the idea of your business Akiya and Inaka being on Discord as well. What an awesome way to share Akiya information.
I mean that's the thing. It's kind of like a live wiki in a sense.
Oh yeah. That's how people use it too.
Yeah, is log on. Oh, you don't know how to paint something, or how do I replace electrical wiring, or whatever. Right? Somebody probably has done it before. And if we have, I mean, make no mistake, our Discord channel is really small right now. We definitely need to build it out. But the idea is, if you just have, a relatively focused group of people with similar experiences that can just share that information. I mean, just like anything else, that just helps everybody. Right?
Absolutely.
And makes it easier to do the Akiya thing in the first place too, because that's something that is still a buried entry of like, oh yeah, I love daydreaming about being like Robinson Crusoe but in Japan in an abandoned house, but shit, how do I actually do it? If you've got somebody to, I mean, that's part of our function too, is to hold people, for lack of a better term, hold people's hands through the process, get them through it, be like, oh no, okay, there, you did it, now you're good to go. On top of that, if we can also point to, hey, here's just a really excellent knowledge resource to figure out how to do kind of whatever comes your way because other people have already done it, that just makes it easier to commit.
One thing, just to loop us back into the whole discussion about Atami. So you are continuing to live in the Atami area. Of course, these big, scary, and deadly landslide happened nearby. Has that given you any second thoughts, or do you feel safe?
No, I feel pretty good. I've also, one thing I am concerned about though, concerned's the wrong word. One thing I am looking into though right now is I had not checked. So Japan regularly produces like hazard maps and stuff, right? And
I love those things. They're all these technicolors
and that's something, at least from an Akiya and Inaka point of view, I think that's something that we now need to be including in our research product for clients.
Ooh,
because I mean, we do we do poop on everything. We do lands inspections and surveys and stuff like that, which are all well and good. And if you do that, then one of the things that you understand from it is, oh, well, it's in a disaster zone or whatever. But I think just for the sake of playing it as safe as possible and also being as transparent as possible with our clients, it behooves us to provide that information just outright. And it's easily accessible. Pretty much any municipality or prefectural government has, like Shizuoka, for example, that's a nation, or not nation, prefecture-wide hazard map that they administer. Of course, I am also very curious to kind of get a third party in there and check the veracity and like the last time the hazard map was updated and things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
You guys could get so much web traffic by just translating those into English.
Actually, some hazard maps are in English.
Oh.
Not all of them, though. It depends on that municipality and whether they've decided that their foreign population is big enough to warrant having an English hazard map.
Well, I mean, this is the
funny story about this. During all of this rain and disaster stuff, I remembered, Edogawa Ward in Tokyo is actually, most of it is actually under sea level.
There's some super dangerous areas there.
Exactly. And so maybe I had a couple of beers and I'm like, let's look up their hazard map. I want to see what it looks like. And they have an English version.
Ah, okay.
It is terrifying and hilarious at the same time.
Isn't it like 100% hazardous?
Pretty much.
Yeah. My friends in Edogawa, during the typhoon in 2019, they had to evacuate.
Yeah, so I mean that's another thing that just goes into. I mean, and this is really sort of the crux of the issue with Akiya. And the first is I kind of hesitate to say minefield, but it sort of is a minefield of there's a lot of things to consider, such that I mean, there are so many such that it's actually kind of difficult to just get through it all and come out on the other side with like, okay, I understand everything. It's a good idea. Let's do it. Right. If you bother committing the time, the resources, effort, all of that to it as yourself, as an individual, you can do it, but it's gonna be like pretty taxing. Right. In order to make a good purchase, you do need to know all of these things. And that's kind of the core service that we provide, in addition or from which follows, the actual closings and administrating all of that, is, okay, you found a thing that looks cool. No matter what, it's probably cool, but let's make sure that it's not going to kill you.
Yeah.
And on that note, thank you so much, Matt, for coming back on Tokyo Wave. In closing, would you like to make any shout outs?
Yeah, check us out. Check Akiya and Inaka out on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, I think is probably a good one, as is YouTube. I think across the board, it's just Akiya Inaka, AKIYAINAKA. Also, check out what we're up to with the underground music scene via Kala. That's KAALA. I love how that rolls out off the tongue. That's on Twitter, YouTube. We're on Twitter, but like don't really do anything with it. Facebook, LinkedIn. Actually, we are, despite being underground rock and roll. Yes, we are on LinkedIn. All over the place there. Usually that's Kala JP, KAALA JP. For the time being anyway, I think that's about it.
Cool, Matt. Thank you again so much for coming on the show.
Always a great time, guys. Thanks so much.
Hey, listeners, that's right. You listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.